Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aria Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Claire Carusillo. Claire, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, REA. I'm Claire. I am here today to talk about my novel that's coming out on August 11th called The Responsible Party.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And a link to where you can purchase the book will be in the show notes. So this is a novel that is very funny, is wacky, is somewhat hard to describe, I would say. It made me laugh. I was turning the pages. So I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. I was thinking maybe one way to just launch into it would be if you could just read very briefly from the start of the novel, so listeners can sort of get an idea of the tone of this book.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. Okay. I guess the only contextual note for the beginning of the novel is that there is an italicized bit that says that this takes place May 1914 to June 1915 in Chicagoland, Vermont, Quebec City, New York City, Kobe, and Liverpool. All right, these are the first two paragraphs.
Sure.
Okay. In the 20th century, people died all the time and laid themselves to rest without the high caliber event planning I will demand of immediate survivors at the end of my own life. No time. Every woman, child, and man alive was out here grinding all day, every day, except on Lincoln's birthday, in death trap packing plants controlled by a 5-man syndicate called the Beef Trust. The work was bloody and desensitizing, and if a colleague's apron snagged on a revolving meat hook and they got sent down the assembly line, their last gasp pleas for mom and God above went unheard over the shrill siren of industrial meat machines crumbling taut cow armpit into heady pink confetti. My mother, Kath, has said that's why nobody heard much about it when my great-great-grandmother Fanny Mounsey died for the first time in a shipwreck in 1914. Nobody heard much of anything. Too loud. A year later, when Fanny came back to life, they started listening, and I'm still hearing about it. Kath has been reinforcing their lore since I was a child.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's a great taste of what you'll find in this novel, and just the idea, when your great grandmother died for the first time, that is, that grabs the reader. So, what is your summary of this novel? What is it about?
Great question, and I still don't have a concise answer, but I'll try my best. It basically is a novel that begins with a true family story in which my great-great-grandmother, Fanny Mounsey, got on a boat and it sank. She died, presumably, a year to the day later, almost. Her family in Chicago got a telegram alleging that she was still alive in an insane asylum in Liverpool. Her family got on another boat to go identify this woman, and that boat ended up being the Lusitania. Only her daughter, Sarah, survived. So the narrator of the book, who shares a name with me, Claire Carusillo, has grown up with this lore, similar to me having grown up with this lore. In the book, however, when Claire's matrilineal DNA shows up on a body that washes up in a desiccated Midwestern bog, Claire starts to ask her mother to re-examine this myth of these shipwrecks. And in doing so, her mother can't help but recount her own childhood in the 1970s, partying at a lighthouse with like a lecherous ne'er-do-well scion of industry. And the rest of the story is sort of braiding together this murder mystery in present day, starring a narrator with my own name, the mother's story of hanging out at this lighthouse, and the ancient shipwrecks tales.
Okay. So the reading this book from the very beginning, I was like, what is real here? What is not real? And your dedication is to your mother, but you indicated the dedication that she does not share the name of the mother in the novel, but the narrator of the novel is someone who shares your real name and some biographical details that are similar to yours.
Yeah.
So when I was reading this, I was like, okay, well, shit, this is sort of autofiction or metafiction or something, but she's fucking around and having fun. And surely,
Yeah.
and surely this stuff about one shipwreck that I had never heard of before and read the Wikipedia page about, and then this other much more famous, you know, maritime disaster, the sinking of the Lusitania. Surely this is fantastical creation. And Claire just decided to put her, a version of herself into this to tell this wacky story. But so 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 parts of this really happened.
Yeah. Yes. And parts of it didn't happen too.
Okay, and you can say
One,
which, you don't have to say which parts really happened, which parts didn't really happen, I guess. But
yeah. And I have found I've only, I haven't, this book doesn't come out for another week and I haven't done it. I've done a little bit of press for this already, but I find myself being cagey with different people about what is true and not, depending on the
mhm.
vibe or the context. But I'll say this much, and I don't I'm not going to be cagey about it. I think it's like an interesting, I know you're a writer too, and I think it's interesting to talk about this kind of stuff with other writers. But um, it is true that like I was haunted my entire childhood and, up to this day, so much so that I wrote a book sort of about it, about these true shipwrecks that had happened to my ancestors. Much of what happens to them after the shipwrecks is not true. And what actually happened to them is probably a more interesting story than the book that I wrote, but it isn't the book that I wrote.
Uh-huh.
In real life, Sarah gets to the insane asylum and finds out that this woman who she hoped would be her mother is not actually her mother. Sarah has to go home empty handed, and she eventually ended up marrying her German claims inspector from the Lusitania. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. But the question that sort of always haunted me, other than like, dark water is scary and I don't want to die drowning, and I don't want to be cursed by this, is who was this other woman and what was she doing? This woman who could have been Sarah's mother, Fanny. So I wanted to imagine a world in which she did recognize this woman in the insane asylum and she brought her home. And as a result, these two women gained a caliber of fame in my book that they didn't in real life. I do think the story is like pretty remarkable. And the fact that Sarah and Fanny were not famous to any degree during their lifetimes, I think is a damn shame. So that's all true. And then I always thought that it was sort of interesting having uh this sort of epic tale of my past and it having no real bearing on my life at all as a person growing up the way that I did, which much of it is, much of the Claire plotline, so to speak, is fairly autofictional. I didn't turn a girl blue and send her into organ failure because of beauty advice I gave on the internet, but I've certainly like done some dumb things on the internet that has endangered the welfare of other people. So
I mean,
um,
who hasn't
I mean, we've all
at
been
this
there. I
point?
mean,
Yeah.
I know, you got to make money somehow. So, yeah, so I basically was always very interested in like juxtaposing a pretty normal upper middle class upbringing in which nothing bad really ever happened to me with this curse that was upon my family. And then the stuff with my mom, I mean, I think you brought up a question about why are there three real people in this book, including me, and then I give my mom a different name. And it's almost like I think that my logic in that was I felt that Sarah and Fanny, their real names should be used because I didn't think that they deserved the amount of, or I didn't think that they got the amount of recognition that they deserved during their lifetime. So in some way, I wanted to honor them and put their names back in people's mouths. But the fact that I used my name, but not my mom's name, almost was also me trying to be respectful in some way. The character Kath, who plays the mother of Claire in this book, she gets involved in some dicey stuff, and a lot of it is involved. It is inspired by stories that my mom has told me, particularly when she was in her 30s, not as a teenager. I changed the timelines. She did have a coworker who lived in a lighthouse 400 yards off the coast of Lake Michigan, and she used to go there and party.
Okay.
So that was also something too that, as an older person, I mean, as a teenager and onward, I knew about. And that also not that didn't haunt me, but it like made me laugh a lot. And once I was on a Chicago architectural boat tour, and the tour guide had mentioned like, oh yeah, a guy used to rent this lighthouse from the Coast Guard for $1, and he used to get complaints all the time because of all the naked people partying on the island. And then I like brought that back to my mom, and she of course claimed that isn't how the parties went. Um, so I mean, a lot of me like not giving my mom's real name to this character, Kath, was a way to try and preserve some sort of dignity for my real mom who is with us, and who also most people who have now read this book have their first question is like, has Suzanne read this book? And she has, and to her credit, like she didn't make me change a single word, and nobody in my family did. And I think she thinks it's funny. I mean, we'll see if things ramp up the rest of this week, like, if that stays the same. But I did want this to be like a ultimately affirming mother-daughter story. And I just thought it was like the more deferential thing to do to not name Claire's mother her real name. Even though I just said her real name, and the real name is also one of the first words of the book in the dedication.
Right.
So like it is like me like sort of having a bit of fun. And I also wanted to immediately like set the parameters of what this book is in the dedication. One of the first things people read to understand that like there is some back and forth here about truthfulness.
Yes, and I don't think I've ever read another novel where the dedication plays this sort of metatextual role in how the reader approaches the rest of the story. Usually it's like you just sort of pass over it or
Yeah.
something. So that's interesting. Were you ever thinking of writing a nonfiction book about your family history, considering that it has these totally insane facts as part of it?
Yeah, but I never the real ending is not so satisfying to me. Uh, I told you that bit about the German claims inspector, but I nobody who has done more research on this than I have. And there are plenty of people who have done more research on this than I have, by the way, which is also like kind of a joke of the story as well. And I've kind of been like classifying this as like disrespectful historical fiction, and that like the narrator hasn't like done a lick of research. I've done a little bit more research than the narrator, but not much.
Mhm.
But that's all to say, I know a few things, and I've seen a few things verified in old newspaper clippings that a cousin gave me about how this story ended, and it doesn't give me the answers that I was looking for. And so
So is this sort of like, I mean, this bizarre thing of someone claiming to be a woman who had seemingly died in a famous boat disaster? Was this like in the newspapers and stuff at the time?
yeah, there's a folder that I have given to me by my mom's like long lost cousin Todd, who like he like put the work in and I didn't. But about halfway through the 10-year process that it took to get this book published, which is like not even an exaggeration at this point, took a full decade. Todd shared all these articles with me. And yeah, there's articles leading up to the family getting on the Lusitania. It's also true, this is not specific to my family, but during the time that Americans were gearing up to get on the Lusitania, the German consulate published ads in 50 newspapers, including their hometown paper, the Chicago Tribune, telling people not to get on passenger boats that were going through enemy water.
Hmm.
There's like a ton of documentation about what a gamble it was to get on the Lusitania, and also what a gamble it was for this specific family, the Mounseys, to go investigate this woman who might or might not be their wife slash mother, or in an insane asylum in Liverpool. The other thing that's never given me a satisfying answer, and this is in the book a little bit, and it can, this photo conveniently gets lost. So the narrator can never fact check it. But I've also seen verification at the time that even though it was a telegram that was sent alerting the family that this woman existed, somehow my great great grandfather, William, also had a photo of the woman who was in the insane asylum and thought that it resembled his wife enough that he was
Hmm.
willing to get on the boat. And yet, I never saw another newspaper clipping or any research or any family history that confirms that this photo ever existed. So, this is all to say that um, I never I never had a satisfying ending to tell, and I wanted to write my way there no matter how unlikely maybe the solution that I came up with reveals itself to be. And also like I think there are ways to have fun with nonfiction for sure. But I couldn't get there myself. I had to start making it.
Right. And,
Yeah,
I mean, there's plenty of examples in real life of someone has some extraordinary brush with history, and then the rest of their life is not particularly interesting to anyone else.
totally.
And perhaps that, and that could make for a happy life, but
Right.
maybe it's less exciting to hear about. But if the book is a smash success, and it gets turned into a movie or something, they'll be like, yeah, prayers up. Like there'll be, like stories on Slate and stuff, like the real Mountie women and investigations and stuff. So maybe,
Maybe someone will put that work in for me.
right.
I
Um,
love answers.
so this is a very usual hybrid novel of some true family history with total wackadoo stuff, meant in a complimentary way. Um,
Yeah,
what
I-
were
I'll
there
take it.
were there other examples of fiction that you were inspired by or that you looked to that had this combination of fancy and real family history?
Yes. I'm sorry. He's a French guy and I'm like forgetting what his first name is. And I'm looking at my bookshelf right now to see if I have him here. Have you ever read the book
Oh
HHH by Laurent Binet? I think his name
no,
is.
but it's about Heinrich Himmler.
Yes. And I think like in German, it's Himmler is Hitler's gun or something is what the HHHH
Uh-huh.
stands for. So this book was introduced to me like probably a semester into writing this book in grad school by my professor Heidi Julavitz, who wrote one of my favorite books, The Folded Clock, which is a nonfiction diary told out of order that's very fascinating. And she's like a stone cold comic genius to me. But she suggested reading this book. There's this guy, an unnamed narrator, who is probably just a proxy for the author, who is trying to figure out this failed coup on Hitler's life or on Himmler's life. It was like a Czech parachuting plot that failed. But in the process of this guy investigating this and going through, documentation and all of that, we see him like go and grab a beer, go on a date and go to the movies. And it's kind of like about his process of researching. And it's funny too. And I think that that was a really good blueprint for me on how this sort of novel could exist and still like have a modicum of historical accuracy to it. And yet there is a narrator in it who like just cannot help but insert the small grievances of everyday life into this larger sweeping saga.
Mhm. Um, so when I was reading this to writers who I thought it sort of your tone and the unusualness of the plot reminded me of, I wanted to ask if I got anywhere near it were David Foster Wallace and Pynchon.
I'll
Um,
take it.
were either of them in your mind when you were writing this?
I mean, certainly I'd love to have the staying power of these guys. Like, yeah, of course I would love to say, yeah, like I aspire to have yeah. I mean, yes. I wouldn't say that these two guys are my top guys by any means, but like
Uh-huh.
I certainly have read them or pretended to have read them in a few cases. And I think I think that like Pynchon, I'm thinking of Inherent Vice right now. And that's an interesting book to me, as are many of his books, in that in Inherent Vice specifically, like I feel like it's someone who we think we're solving a mystery. And then like maybe halfway through the book, you're like, wait, is there even a mystery to solve here? And in a similar way, maybe the first half of the book, you're getting to the root of a murder mystery. And then one of the characters in my book, I mean, and one of the characters just basically spits it out. This is what happened. And then the mystery of the book shifts to something else.
Mhm.
So I certainly think like playing with form in that way is very fascinating. I think that David Foster Wallace also uses like a lot of proxy narrators and goes on tangents in a way that I think is extremely formally interesting to me and something that I'm sure that I've tried to emulate in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the his unfinished final novel, Pale King, Wallace I'm talking about, has the narrator who shares his own name and biographical details, but then all sorts
Right.
of someone is levitating and all sorts of other wacky stuff is happening, and there were just something in the tone reminded me of other like Wallace short stories of I don't know how to describe it exactly. Something about the like bouncy tone and jumping into different like registers or using colloquialisms or something
Yeah.
as the narration goes along, including like anachronistic metaphors and stuff and talking about the past.
Yeah, totally. And that was like I think that's, and hopefully, like, I wouldn't go so far as to call it a tick of mine, but I think that's a lot of fun. And also, it was almost a balm for writing a complicated book that threads together so many timelines, is because all of this is filtered through a present day narrator who is a little bit disinterested in what's happening before she like kind of goes insane and gets too invested in some ways. If anything, in speech or dialogue or metaphor is anachronistic, I as a writer can always say that that is just how the narrator processes things, even though she shares my name. But like it is a little trick that I've been able to use to my advantage, and that I think it creates for like a fun style. But also it was, if some of the old timey 1914 dialogue sounds a little rickety, some of that is also intentional in that this is how a kind of dumb dumb of a narrator might think people from the olden times spoke.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So, yeah.
that makes sense. So how did you arrive at the way the novel is narrated of it's largely the character Claire relating a story that the mother Kath is telling her? Was that an idea from the start, or did you arrive at it after trying other narrative techniques?
Yeah, like for a long time, the narrator, even though that style was there, you didn't see much of the narrator present day. You assumed her name might be Claire, but she was never doing anything. She never had a problem to solve current day. And I think it was probably like, I don't know, maybe 6 years into writing this book. And I had had a different agent. It didn't work out between us. My new agent, and now new, this is like 5 years old at this point, but her name is Monica Woods. And she at one point suggested to me, like, just why don't you just call your narrator Claire, and why don't you give her something to do?
Hmm.
So it was always a book filtered through, it was always like a historical novel in some ways, filtered through a couple of different perspectives and told by a contemporary narrator. But it wasn't always a book that was told by a contemporary narrator as it's being told to her by her mother, who has some sort of agenda, and is maybe concealing things as she talks, and whom the narrator is suspicious of. And in some ways, that's like overly complicated the way that I've decided to narrate this book. But it was also important to me that like the narrator of this book was not the ultimate authority on anything, that she was not like smarter than her characters, and that she was not funnier than her characters. And by highlighting the way that her mother told things with her little bits of commentary on them, to me was like a way to sort of take some of the emphasis away from me as a writer who has a narrator with my own name, and sort of like spreading some of that generosity onto other characters
Huh.
who are inspired by real people, dare I say.
Okay, interesting. So the mother is a businesswoman who invented a chemical that has multiple uses, and one of the uses. Well, can you describe this idea of what the business is and where did this particular thing come from?
Yeah. Okay. It was important to me that like we see women consuming, inventing, and propagating useless products like throughout this entire book. So I'll just like preface it with that. Like the narrator Claire is a beauty writer. The unsinkable Moundsey women, after they come back from their shipwrecked lives, go on the medicine man circuit with a charlatan who is hawking all sorts of tonics and products. And in order to create a bit of mirroring, I knew that the mother character, Cass, had to also be hawking some sort of product. Um, and the thing that she invents that makes her rich and successful and creates such a cushy life for her daughter and the rest of her family is a edible-ish plastic spray that's its first intention was to be used as a salad crisping spray. If you sprayed it on greens, it would keep your lettuce crispy for 24 hours plus, even with a mayonnaise-based dressing, is what I think I say in the book.
Uh-huh. And that seems very Midwestern to me, the mayonnaise-based dressing.
Totally, yeah. And like there's a lot of like McDonald's and like mayonnaise in this book. And I also like wanted, yeah, like, perhaps, Kath, you see her working as a 16, 17-year-old at the McDonald's. Like, I also wanted that thread in there of produce or like sogginess or something being a part of her through line as a businesswoman. So anyway, an alternative use for this sort of innocuous product is soon discovered. Tankers of it get bought by a American Saudi oil conglomerate, and what it's done is it's used ultimately to pre-treat marine life in case of an oil spill, an offshore oil spill. So it's it sort of becomes like a preventative. I don't really know how to. I guess I would describe it as like it becomes like a safeguard in an evil corporation, and that also ultimately you find out in an anecdote later that really has no bearing on the story. That it's actually like getting in the bellies of baby seabirds and killing them anyway. So it's not like it's not a net good, and it's ultimately just another like goo that some woman in this family is hawking. Yeah.
I didn't. So I didn't connect that all the generations are selling some sort of chemical product that has possibly dubious
Totally.
effects. That's really funny. But like the salad thing, like that, those exist, like things you spray on salad to like keep it crisp, right?
I don't know. Like, I suddenly like, and again, like, this is another shortcut that I was allowed to take because of the way that the narrator speaks. Is that like, I don't think I do a great job of explaining what this product is chemically. I don't know if salad crisping spray exists. Like, I'm sure school cafeterias, I'm sure like Cisco, which provides, 90% of the produce to everywhere in America, I'm sure there's some chemical sprayed on their iceberg lettuce that is horrible for us, is a microplastic that's in us forever. And that,
Right.
yeah, like it keeps lettuce a little crispier for another 6 hours or something.
Yeah, and maybe this, I didn't think about this explicitly till now, but maybe this is why sort of like the pension, like this seems sort of like a pension-esque kind of thing is like there's some little thing that seems innocuous, but actually it has this like global, like conspiratorial kind of spread, literally spread in case of the stuff that they're dumping in the oceans, and then like it's sort of behind everything. Yes, that's a very funny idea. Do you consider this a Chicago novel, an Illinois novel, a Midwestern novel, or any or none of those things?
Yeah, I do. I grew up in suburban Chicagoland, and for as long as I've wanted to be a writer, I've wanted to tell some story about my family, the Moundsies, but even more so, I've wanted to try to write beautifully about sprawl and strip malls, which is not necessarily a Midwestern phenomenon at all, but it's what I knew growing up. I find like a immense spookiness in forest preserves, which where I grew up are like sort of dotted all over in between, major highways. So yeah, like that was all that kind of landscape has always been really interesting to me. And this is certainly more of a suburban Chicagoland novel than it is a big city Chicago novel. And the parts of this that do take place explicitly in Chicago happen in a lighthouse 400 yards off the coast of Navy Pier. And I think that that has like a similar griminess, that lighthouse. So yeah, I really did want this to be a suburban Midwestern novel.
And were there, who are Midwestern or Illinois writers that, like, so who are your guys if we're talking about the chroniclers of the Midwest?
I mean, in some ways, we got to give it up to Jonathan Franzen. I think he was probably like the first curious male novelist that I ever read as a high schooler. And many of his stories at least start out. I think he grew up in Western Springs, which is the town next to the town I grew up in, and the town that I fictionalize in this book is called Hinsdale, Illinois.
Okay.
But I don't ever explicit. Maybe I can't remember. There was a part where the main character is Googling Hinsdale, Illinois cop DUI, but I don't even remember if that's in the book. But I mean, that has always been really fascinating to me, that this guy, who again, like, I think The Corrections was probably my first grown-up novel that I read. And that's not necessarily an Illinois novel, but I did find it something special about the fact that he was from almost exactly where I was from.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's definitely that. I would say though that like a lot of popular media, especially like from the 80s and 90s, that's focused on suburban Chicagoland would be like John Hughes movies.
Right.
And those all take place on the North Shore of Chicagoland, which is a totally different vibe than what I'm trying to capture. North Shore is very like old money on the lake. I grew up in the western suburbs. And the town that I specifically grew up in is like a very new money, a lot of Southsiders from like the south side of Chicagoland got a little bit of money. Specifically, I'm thinking like from the stock market, and migrated over Western yonder. So that is like sort of the that's like the micro populace that I dwelled in and am interested by.
When I was reading this, I had just had the thought, this is a very moist novel.
Go on.
Well, especially maybe the scene, the first like party scene at the lighthouse. There's a lot of description. Like it seems like, you know, I could feel the humidity. Like you're describing it, and like water. You know, there's shipwrecks and a lighthouse, and it just seems, I don't know, it seems humid.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So what? How would you respond to that?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's like a real like fizzle of humidity that's in all of this. And like sort of one of the inciting events of this book is our I think I'm calling Claire, the narrator, the main character sometime, but I would actually say that the main character of this book is the teenage version of her mother, Kath. And Kath, one of the inciting incidents is these two older men come and visit her at McDonald's, and she's like titillated and scared, and she ends up burning her hand. And they try and help her by sticking her hand in cold water, which, you know, is a no-no. You're not supposed to ice it, etc. But yeah, like I think from an elemental point of view, yeah, like I'm really interested in like sogginess and an overlay of water on everything that we touch. And I think like most of the things described in this book are waterlogged, or they've been damaged in some way by water, or water is used as a balm. And I think that that is true of all of the timelines. And also like our narrator, Claire, is always searching for some sort of moisturization on a skin deep level because of her career as a beauty writer. And that's also like ripped from the headlines, auto-fictional. I'm obsessed with moisturizing. But yeah, like I that's another thing of mirroring. And like, to use a turn of phrase, like I wanted it watered down from one generation to the next, of shipwrecks to this spray that Kath invented that was meant to preserve moisture in lettuce, to this sort of like fail son of a daughter, Claire, who's claim to fame is that she like writes a beauty newsletter about moisturization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so towards the end of the book, one character says, "Where are you going?" Another one says, "To the lighthouse." And
Well, yeah, you picked up on
as
that.
a former English major, I couldn't help but notice. And I only read To the Lighthouse last year. That
Okay.
was one that had been I had on my shelf for a long time and hadn't read. But was is that just a
Typical man.
well, randomly the first Wolf novel I read was Orlando, which I got from
Mm,
a bookstore where everything was free, and just pulled it
cool.
off the shelf randomly. So I read that in college. But is To the Lighthouse or other Wolf works part of like the stew that went into this?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, To the Lighthouse is a book that changed my life in many
Wow.
ways. Um, for some reason in college, I was a women's studies. I shouldn't laugh. I don't even think the program exists anymore. I don't think that I was a women's studies major at liberal arts college. And I don't think in the year 2026, I don't even think it's called that anymore. It's probably
Yeah,
just
it
like
might be illegal.
sociology.
Yeah.
Totally. And like, I get it. But like, there was like a real emphasis on feminist literature when I was in this program. And so I read Virginia Woolf as, like a sophomore, junior in college. And I've already been compared to Pynchon and David Foster Wallace, and I'm going to go ahead and also say that I'm quite Wolfian in my prose. JK, but what I would say is that like she broke things open for me in terms of stream of consciousness writing, and I don't think that formally, what is my book called? I was going to just call it To the Light. I don't think the responsible party is I don't think it's as formally confusing necessarily as To the Lighthouse is. I don't go directly into one character's brain into the next, but I do. Um, and there's also like more of a self-conscious filtering of this is how I got this story and this is why I'm in this character's head. But she certainly blew my mind in a way that you could follow someone's stream of consciousness. And I go off on quite a few tangents in this book. But yeah, To the Lighthouse is basically like a novel where nothing really happens. And there's a sad little Victorian boy who keeps wanting to go sailing, and his dad keeps telling him that the weather is not fair enough for him to go. There is a woman who is on this vacation with this perfect family who keeps trying to paint a picture of a
Mhm.
beautiful scene of domesticity. And then you kind of, nothing really happens for 150 pages. And then halfway through, there's just a passage called, or there's a chapter called Time Passes, where you see the lighthouse erode entirely. And then our protagonist is dead during the third part of the book, Mrs. Ramsey. So yeah, like
Spoiler
spoiler
alert for
alert. Yeah, this book
a
was
book
written
that
like
was
3,000 years
yeah.
ago. Yeah.
And I mean,
Um,
people should read The Responsible Party, but after they read that, or maybe before they read that, they should read To the Lighthouse, which I did enjoy, not taking it as a college student, but reading it
yeah.
on my own last year. Yeah, there's parts that really like knocked my socks off
No, totally.
in
Like
that.
it's a sock knocker of a book, even though again it's like not that interesting, but like the time passes part
Yeah,
is so crazy to me,
yeah.
and a lot of that is a lot of that went into describing this lighthouse that Cath parties at in 1971, this sort of derelict lighthouse. But also, like, I would think that there are maybe if you're like a wolf scholar, some like kind of corny allusions in this book.
Mm.
You find out that Irv, who is the scion of industry who lives in the lighthouse, you find out that his siblings have the same name as some of the Ramsey siblings.
Oh, okay.
Um, and then ultimately, like, this is not like a total one to one, but it really is like a story about an artist trying to be truthful and never getting there. And I like to consider myself a Lily Briscoe of sorts, trying to paint a picture. Maybe I don't know, but like there's something there. Or if I had to like write an essay about it, I'm sure I could get there,
Uh-huh.
making this point that I'm trying to make to you right now. Even
Um,
if I'm not there yet.
well, this is early in your press run for
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
book, so
Yeah.
you can work on it. So the title of the book, The Responsible Party. Can you talk about that? And but also, did you think about naming it From the Lighthouse? Slash, has anyone ever named a book From the Lighthouse?
And also, like, book titles aren't copyrighted. Like, it
Right.
could have just been called To the Lighthouse.
It could have been To the Lighthouse
Yeah,
too.
that's so funny. Oh, god damn it. Yeah, I
There might
guess I
still be
didn't
time.
think.
There might still be time.
And well, for a long, okay, well, yeah, like From the Lighthouse is certainly something I thought of. I think again, Monica, my agent, was like, you could do better. For a long, okay, so the first version of this book, and I think my thesis in grad school, my thesis project was a version of this book. And I thought a really good title for the longest time for this book was Dry Heave, which like really
Mhm.
like to me, like it's like like
Yeah.
that. Like and everyone's there is like a lot of barfing in this book. But also like I thought there was something nautical about the word heave, but also all of this nautical stuff is happening in a landlocked state of Illinois. There's no access to the ocean, even though there are the Great Lakes there. But that was nixed by quite a few people. And then for a long time, this book was also called Women and Children First, which is the Birkenhead drill, which when you're egressing from a sinking ship, women and children are the first to
Mhm.
be allowed on the lifeboats. But then like 2 years ago, a novel came out called Women and Children First. So I had to change
Oh
it.
damn.
So my sister, Julia, who in many ways like is the better half of my brain, she's a little bit like more elegant of a thinker than I am. She suggested The Responsible Party. It's kind of a pun because like a big centerpiece of this book is Cass going to a party underage and at first trying to embrace the party girl lifestyle and then getting marooned on this island with a drug-addled party boy who's never done a thing for himself in his life. And she kind of like learns responsibility and learns how to weaponize responsibility. But also it's a pun because of all these unanswered questions about who has harmed who in the book, whether it's in terms of who is actually responsible for sinking the Lusitania or the Empress of Ireland. Is the narrator Claire actually the responsible party for this girl turning blue and going into organ failure because of a inelegance with language about how much colloidal silver to take? Um, so yeah, it's a play on going to a party and like becoming a drag, but also pointing fingers and how people tell stories to evade being the responsible party and to have people see things and them in a better light.
I want to ask you also about your bookstore where you're recording this from. But before that, is there anything else you want to mention about the book?
Oh, yeah, just like in general, I mean, it's been so interesting to talk about this book because it's about a person with my name. It took me simply so long for this book to ever take. It took me, 7 years to get a book deal. It took another 2 years for it to come out, or maybe eight. Anyway, it's all to say it's been a pretty interesting time starting to do press for this because I'm talking about this character Claire, who I think in the book is 31, but I was 25 when I first started writing this. I'm about to turn 35 in a couple days, and it's really interesting to even like what I'm talking about, like the responsible party here. It's so weird to be talking about like a version of myself that was always fictional, but maybe I relate to now even less than
Uh-huh.
I had before. And yet like I feel protective over her in some way. Like I think a couple of minutes ago I called her a dum dum. And that like seems I wish that I could take it back. I some of this is about like being gentler with your past self. Some of this book in some ways. Um, or at least like providing more context to the parts of yourself, the memories that you have of yourself that you hate and wish that you could change. So it's like just a really interesting thing to talk about. And I'm not like, if I'm not totally lucid on this right now, like that there's a reason why. And yet I enjoy talking about it. So thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Well, happy to. Number one, I enjoyed the book. Number two, happy birthday in a few days.
Thank you.
Number three, I think your lucidity is fine. And whatever edits I do will only make you sound more lucid
Okay, good.
in the final product. Okay, but can you talk a little bit briefly about, is it called Storyboard Midway or just Storyboard?
It's just called Storyboard,
Okay,
yeah. But it's in a town called Midway, Utah.
right. And
So
and
I live
Midway.
in
Okay, so this is a project that I don't really. We had just know each other from online stuff, and
yeah,
just following you, saw you embarking on this project. Started. Well, you told me when you started. It's been years. I was like,
2 years
oh,
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's doing like interior renovations, and like this is something that was like a commercial kitchen, or there's like,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow, like
Yeah.
she's so handy, but also like this is crazy whatever project she's doing, and yeah, let's like just can you
No,
talk more about this?
totally. Yeah. I left New York City at this point 2.5 years ago. My parents live part-time in Park City, Utah, which is a very ski town. I had spent some time here during the pandemic, moved back to New York for where I've been living before, um, for the failed Gawker job that I had. Although it
Oh
wasn't
man.
failed because we got some friendships out of it. Um,
Oh, I mean, I mourn the loss of Gawker 2.0 every day.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a
you're,
great.
you're one of the only people who's ever said that to me. So thank
Oh, what?
you.
No, a great website, and it's just another thing that like the internet has just gotten worse over time. Like we don't people aren't doing the things that Gawker
Right.
2.0 writers were doing, which was such a fun site to read.
I like don't even click. I don't even know. I mean, I think New York Mag is still holding it down in some ways, but like I simply I don't go to websites anymore. Like and I miss that so much. And I was like a Gawker reader from high school onward and like emulating the lifestyle of Emily Gould in some ways. Like being a suburban Illinois teen and like, oh my God, she's glam or whatever. And so that was like a true dream come true for me. But it didn't I got 2 years of a job. That's like longer than I've held a job down for a long time. But anyway, in the meantime, my second stint in NYC, I had met my boyfriend Galen. Uh he's like a 40-year-old skate rat. Now he's 40. He was like 35 when we met, maybe. But he's a big reader and writer. We actually met. He had read an article that I had written, and then we met at a party later. But I'm not here to tell this beautiful love story. But what I am here to say, so fascinating. Um, but so we he had never really been to Utah. I feel a real calling towards the mountains. And if I ever write a second book, it will be about silver mining in the Wasatch Mountains.
Hmm.
Um, I'm like addicted to like these. I grew up secular in Illinois, as you probably know from reading the book. I have no actual connection to the Mormon church, to anything in Utah. I just like enjoy the mountains. But anyway, I felt compelled back here in some way. And I had long wanted to open a bookshop. He taught me how to skateboard as a 30-year-old. Um, People like hanging out at bookstores. People like hanging out at skate shops. We threw a coffee bar in to sweeten the deal in some ways. But I, wanted to live in the mountains, and yet culturally, maybe I was worried that there would be nothing, I would be missing a certain kind of third space. So 2.5 years ago, long story short, 2.5 years ago, we moved to Utah, lived with my parents for like 18 months. We found an old service station turned bakery it was called the Filler Up when it was a bakery. Behind this old service station that I'm now sitting in, actually, there was a little brick house that they had used as a commercial kitchen. I now live in that kitchen. And we spent the first like 6 months of having this property just like selling ovens on Facebook. Like, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Like, and had we understood what we were in for, like I honestly don't think we would have attempted this. But anyway, this is all to say we've renovated 2 buildings now. My sister, who named the book, is also the person who designed this space. You walk in, the old like waiting room of where you would get your oil changed or whatever is now a little coffee bar. The first garage bay is a little skate shop, and the second garage bay is a little bookstore. Starting tomorrow, we're going into our 8th week of business. So we're brand new, but people are showing up, skaters coming out of the woodwork everywhere, readers coming out of the woodwork everywhere. we had to take like a 5-month break on construction in this building because within like 2 months of buying this building in 2024, I got a book deal, which was not like I always knew it would happen, but like the rest of the world didn't. Like we had moved on. So I was having like an actual, like I'm smiling saying this now, but I was having like an actual like nervous breakdown trying to do these two things at once. And part of my book deal, part of the terms were that I had to excise 50 pages of plot out of the book to shorten it. So like I had a really bad couple of years. That said, now we've been open for almost 8 weeks, and in the 9th week of business, my debut novel is coming out. So like maybe things worked out as they should. Maybe like I can use having a bookstore as a perk for selling my book and vice versa. So that's where I'm at right now. It's like really cute in here. We've got good coffee. And if anyone's ever in northern Utah, I'm here for you. You can stay all day. All you have to do is like buy like one cortado.
Well, I mean, it's very impressive. And writing and selling a novel or renovating and opening a small business, either of those things seem very daunting and impressive that you've accomplished them, that it's lined up,
Thank you.
that they're happening at the same time, 10 times. So, the town also, and if you don't want to talk about this, we don't have to. The
I
town
know
is
what you're going to say, and I want to talk about it.
okay. The town
I think
is
I know what you're going to say.
yes. The town is also where this woman, who her store or persona is called Ballerina Farms.
How'd you know this? Did I tell you this?
No, I just connected the dots myself because this woman. I mean, because I knew the Midway, and then this is not a topic I would have paid attention to, but like it bubbles up. Like people are always talking about this woman,
Right.
who had the nom de Instagram or whatever. Ballerina Farms is like a tradwife influencer, and there's that novel Yesteryear that came out that's it seems to be loosely based on this woman's persona or something. And so I guess it's anyway. Say whatever you want, but it's really this is helping business.
Yes. Okay. It's been such a wild ride with this. I'm not even being like, oh, I was so above the fray. I didn't know who this woman was before 2 summers ago. We had already bought this place. We were deeply under construction, hadn't moved into the house yet. And I think an article came out about her in the some like Irish newspaper, where basically like the discourse online was that she was being held hostage by her husband and, like stuff like that. So that was like my first understanding that this woman existed and that she lived close to me. She lives her farm is actually a couple towns over in a town called Camas. But last summer, which again was like one of the worst times of my life, all of this stuff that was happening like seemed good, but it was so far in the future and I was struggling a lot. And Ballerina Farm opened a farm stand 3 blocks from where I'm sitting right now. So 3 blocks from where my business is. And seemingly overnight, this town that I live in, Midway, transformed from kind of like a half Mormon stronghold, half town where people who couldn't afford to live in Park City anymore started a life. Also like a huge farming community. Many of the farms have, but even before I got here, have been sold off and made into housing developments, but has like a real agrarian charm, much sleepier pace. I don't know if you've been to Park City, but like quite touristy and huge hotels, but like a totally different pace of life down here and absolutely beautiful. Overnight, we started noticing that, and I've used this image before, so like I apologize, but like literally sprinter vans of blonde women being dropped off in front of City Hall and beelining to Ballerina Farm. And it like scared the shit out of me because we are so in debt building this and moving into a house. And it terrified me that I had made, like, not to be crass, but like $1 million mistake in trying to start a community or a third space in a place that like totally rejected the things that I am, which is like an unmarried 34-year-old, doesn't have children. I live with a boyfriend who we don't have plans on getting married. Like, I'm not from here. All of this stuff, like it scared the shit out of me. And then of course, like the articles started coming from wherever that were like, like a couple months ago, there was an article that the New York Times put out that said that this town, Midway, Utah, was the tradwife mecca of the United States. Which the longer that I've lived here now, I've lived here about 18 months. It's not true. There are certainly like people who are dressed as tradwives in prairie dresses who get dropped off here, but I'm sort of hard pressed to find people in this community or my neighbors. Most of us are transplants, for better or for worse. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's true, and there actually has been like enormous backlash to Ballerina Farm by people who live in this town. And I was one of them, but now now that I'm a business owner, and it's flip flop over
Things
here.
suddenly look a little different.
Like I'll take it. Okay, everybody. I want more people to read books. Okay, I'll take it. Everybody's got a son who's a skater, hopefully a daughter too. More people who are observant in LDS drink coffee than you would think. And I've actually
Interesting.
just come to a place with this that as a writer and as someone who is an observer here, above all else, like what a rich tapestry that I have to observe out my window. And I've heard some rumblings that she is leaving behind her storefront in town and going to focus entirely on her farm, which is about 20 minutes away from here, and like have this whole like agro-tourism thing. And honestly, I didn't think I'd be at this place with it last year, like where I was last year, but like I might be sad to see her go if it is true that she's leaving. I get to talk to like so many fascinating people who are here because of her, who look at me as like some sort of anomaly. And that's also like always a nice feeling too. So I'm like, I never thought that this would complicate my life so much. And I've like been up and down with this. But ultimately, I'm like, all right, she's bringing people to my doorstep.
Right.
Yeah, it's just been like, and now I've been talking about this for like, 8 minutes or something. And I never thought I'd have this many opinions on an influencer whose life I know very little about. My ultimate word, though, if we're looking for a sound clip or whatever, is like, you can't be a trad wife if you're a billionaire and also you're a successful business person who's really good at advertising herself as something that maybe she is and maybe she isn't. Like, to me, I'm like, okay, she's a savvy business person at the end of the day.
Right. Maybe
Yeah,
not that different from Kath, the adult Kath mother figure,
right.
in the novel in some way. Yeah, it's so strange. I mean, there's been so many think pieces about the whole tradwife thing, and it's like this cosplaying social media thing, and it's obviously like an actual whatever the actual life that a person who was a traditional wife was leading, like they wouldn't have time to be making videos to post
Right.
on social
Or
media
have a
about this because they're
staff, right.
yeah, and so it's also odd, but I mean, if if it happens to help help your projects and your bottom line, then God bless. And
Yeah, God bless, for real. Did you read Yesteryear?
no, but I've absorbed some of the commentary about it, and I don't think I will be reading it, but it just
Yeah,
sounds. I mean, yeah, it's just a weird. America's a weird place. I guess Utah is one of the weirder places within America,
totally.
and there's all sorts of unusual people in this country.
Yeah, yeah. And Yesteryear, like, left much to be desired from my point of view, like, as a novel. I thought like the twistiness was interesting. But I will say this.
Are you selling copies in the store?
Yeah, I'm selling it in here, and I'll say like there has been no other book this. Again, I only have 8 weeks of data to go off, but like there are very few books that I can talk about to so many different walks of life, and people have an opinion on it. So it's like, I don't necessarily read books in order to like stay a part of the zeitgeist, but this is one that I did. I thought I should be informed on it. I read it in an afternoon and had fun with it. And
Mhm.
I didn't think it really got to like the psychological root of why a Juilliard ballerina would trade everything and go live on a farm. Like it didn't give me anything interesting there. I wanted more, but the fact that like I'm talking to Mormon women and I'm talking to, crust punk biker women who moved to Utah in order to hit the trails, like that we're all talking about this book, I find it's done something right that like I could only hope that my book could do a fraction of that.
Yeah, I mean, the books of the year in the discourse so far are Yesteryear and the Odyssey.
Yeah,
And maybe the Responsible Party will be the third in that
it'll get there.
trifecta. Okay, we've gone a while. Maybe we should leave things there. Okay, so link to the where you can get the book will be in the show notes. If people want to follow you in general, where would you direct them to go?
Oh, I would say like go to the Storyboard Instagram, Storyboard Midway. I think like I mean, honestly, like it's not killing me because it's what I want. And like I have control here, but like my own personal Instagram lately is like literally me just like retweeting the book over. Retweeting is not the phrase, you know what I mean?
Right.
Reposting the book cover over and over again, being like August 11th, so like I don't really
It's a
think
great
that.
cover, by the way. I think
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
it'll grab people who are just browsing in any
Yes, but
bookstore.
I've heard in many ways that, well, I had to tell like the marketing people at Holt like that I couldn't hear anymore about Goodreads. I'm too sensitive, but like apparently this cover has people thinking that this is like a sexy beach read, and
Huh.
apparently I'm not performing well on Goodreads because people were expecting more of a linear narrative because of the waves on the cover.
Oh,
And then I
interesting.
said, I'm simply not emotionally equipped to hear any more feedback about Goodreads. And I haven't checked since,
That's
but
sensible.
I don't think it's doing well. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
you could send them.
but the people on there are strange.
Yeah, to say the least. Sorry to alienate them, but I'm just like, who, like, sorry. And now I'm like speaking out of pocket or whatever. But like, from what I can tell, like, the publishing industry really is catering to sending galleys to these Goodreads reviewers rather than like, I think it was like pulling teeth, like getting you a copy, even though like I knew I was going to talk to you about this. And it's been so interesting. Like I made this huge list of people that I'm like, oh, I know they'll post about it. I know they'll do coverage, whatever. And like all of the efforts and now I'm like being a bitch right now, but like it seems like much of the effort and what works is giving the books to the Goodreads reviewers. And
Interesting.
I'm like, call me an old fuddy duddy, but I'm just like, damn, these girls have a lot of power.
Right. I mean, well, there were when the a couple months ago when the Washington Post closed their book sections, I saw
Yeah.
something that there were 5 full-time paid book reviewers left in America.
Yeah.
So that's not great, but people do still want to read, and they want to,
Five?
that's the number I heard. That
Oh
there
my
were
God.
7 before the Washington Post closed the section, and now 5. I mean, maybe this only counts people who are full-time employed as
Yeah.
only a book critic. But yeah, a lot of them
Damn.
have
I didn't know
been
that number.
a lot of
That
them have
sucks,
been laid
especially
off.
because like I have no control anymore. And I'm like, please, New York Times books. That's all I'm asking for. And they're like, Claire, like you can't, there's nothing to do. You can't do anything about it. So it's like,
Yeah,
this is
and
going to be embarrassing in like 3 days with like, there's no review. And I'm just like, well, okay, but whatever. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's
and
like
I mean,
the
it's
numbers
so
are on my
random,
side.
and
Yeah.
who knows? But I think people will enjoy this book. I hope it gets into people's hands. And yeah, okay. So thanks, Claire, for coming on. The book is
Thank you.
the book is The Responsible Party. People who like this show can smash that subscribe button and leave a positive review and tell their friends, or tell if they have to be a Goodreads. Maybe there's a Goodreads for podcasts or something out there. Like, leave a 5-star review on that. Or maybe we
Yeah.
should start that up.
Yeah. Maybe we should do that. I also wanted to say, for your coastal elite audience, I have a reading slash talk back at McNally Jackson Seaport on August 19th with Darcy Wilder, who was one of my Gawker coworkers too. So if anyone is like looking for that sort of experience, um, that'll be like the New York debut. And
Right.
if you're listening from Utah on August 10th, we're having a rager here at Storyboard, and a softcore punk band called Gonk is playing.
Okay. Now I don't think this is going to go up before that event, but it might go
Okay.
up before you're at McNally Jackson Seaport. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thematic, tied to a book
Totally.
that has a lot of maritime history. So
Yeah.
people should check that out. Okay. Well, thank you again, Claire, and thanks to the listeners out there. We'll see you again next time.
Okay. Thanks.